everybody, my name is Brianna Bretta, and I'm here with Kevin Durso, the Flyers Insider for 97.3, and we are back to talk about the Philadelphia Flyers for this week again. So I think we should start with what everybody's talking about right now, the Gauthier and Jamie Drysdale trade. What are your thoughts about that? We were both at the game. You were up in the press box. I was down in the stands when that happened. What was that like in the moment?
Chaos, because it didn't look first of all, it didn't look real. It
Mm-hmm.
was one of these things. Sometimes you have these things where when a trade happens, somebody has it and kind of there's reports floating around and you are a little bit more prepared for something. You're more trying to confirm something that the two teams just flat out announced it on social media. And there was no warning signs, nothing like that. And that's how social media is today too. There's things that pop up. You see graphics that people create that are designed to fool you and things like that. So as much as the trade itself, a 19, 20-year-old prospect for a 21-year-old defenseman with a draft pick attached to it, that part looks legit, but this can't be right. Like there's been no warning signs. So this can't be true. And then as you start to piece it together, it's like, hey, check this out. This is going around. It's the two teams'
Mm-hmm.
social media accounts putting this out there. And PR's right behind us also telling us Danny Briere's talking after the first intermission. That tells you all you need to know. There's your confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was real. The shock factor wears off and then it becomes kind of piecing everything together, what happened or trying to figure out what happened, and really just kickstarted a night where that was supposed to be kind of for this stage of the season, considering that we didn't really expect the Flyers to be in this spot at this time. That was kind of a marquee matchup. It's Battle of Pennsylvania. It's Flyers Penguins. Both are in the playoff race. We're at the halfway point of the year. And you're just getting settled in. And the crowd was just getting settled in too.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I'm from my position in the press box, just starting to get kind of into position and kind of start to watch the game and see how this is going to unfold. And to that point, by the way, already the game had unfolded and there was already a goal in the game for Pittsburgh. So you're trying to kind of catch up on that. And then that comes out. And the rest of the game became totally secondary. So the game didn't matter anymore. It was all about this trade and focusing on that. And kind of felt like that on the ice too a little bit because that was probably the Flyers' worst game of the week. And sure enough, it just worked out that way. For them on the ice, they didn't really know much of anything until after the game. Obviously, the players didn't, but it seemed like it had just kind of this effect on the whole night in general. That was the story, and the rest of it was all secondary.
I was at the game with my dad, and my friend texted me and checks me in all caps. And I was like, what's wrong? She was like, she just said Jamie Drysdale. And I was like, yeah. And my dad was talking to me at the same time, and he was like, Flyers look really flat. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what's going on? And she's all caps. She's like, Jamie Drysdale. And I'm like, yes. And she's like, to Philly. And I was like,
yeah. And I got up from like where my seats, because we're all lined up just pretty much in a row or whatever. I went down a few seats basically to people who I sit with regularly, and went down a few seats to my left, a few to my right, and went, get on social now. Like, check this out now, because this is taking precedent over anything else. I'm like, you got to see this. This is what everybody's going to be talking about. And it pretty much stopped all flow of the game itself and watching the game, and shifted everything to this potential trade.
You could hear everybody throughout like sections. Like one person would find out. My friend was up top. I think he was in 216. And he was like, one person said it, and everybody in the section pulled their phone out. Like it was like a wave of people just finding out. You could hear the section next to me. And my dad was like, what is going on? And I was like, oh, there's a trade happening.
And it was the timing of it too. Like it's one thing for, and I understand this, like the Flyers broke this down. Danny Briere was very transparent about it when he did talk about it, that they felt like this was the time because the value may never be higher.
Yeah.
But that's also what added to the shock factor, was that Flyers fans were watching World Juniors a week ago and watching him play, watching him tie for the tournament lead in points, and thinking this is a key part to the future because that's the way that everything was. And it is a credit to the Flyers kind of to an extent also, that they kept this under wraps the way that they did for upwards of 6 months. Like that just doesn't tend to happen. So the fact that they even got what they did in return because they kept it so quiet, and everybody else that they talked to was willing to keep it quiet, that just doesn't tend to happen. And that's really good work by their front office to do it in that style, to give, well, for two reasons. One, to give him a chance to potentially, if he like they said, if he changes his mind back, then what happens if the fans find out that he at one point in time within the last year said, I don't want
Yeah.
to be a Flyer, and then changes his mind? That they're going to hold that against him equally as much as they are the whole situation now, obviously, because obviously now he's become a villain in the city. That's just,
You saw
it's
an
it's
immediate
natural.
reaction with
Yeah.
people where it was like a week ago, everybody was loving Cutter. You know, he was assistant captain, won the gold. And then overnight, he was on a list of people who should not come to the city. And it was one of the craziest things I think I've ever seen.
And it's not, that the future matchup that it's going to be now, assuming everything goes smoothly and he signs in Anaheim, which sure seems like the indication,
Yeah.
obviously. But if he makes the team next year, let's just say, because the Flyers don't play the Ducks for the rest of this year, they've already completed the season series. So you jump to next season's schedule. I would not typically peg a Flyers Ducks game as
As
something that would get
yeah.
national TV possibilities, be an instant sellout kind of thing. Like, it's kind of that's usually like that casual game that gets thrown into either really early in the season or like midway through the season. It's either
Mhm.
in October or in January. They tend to bring the Ducks to town. And it's kind of glossed over because it's usually a midweek game. It's not one of those things. It'll probably be a midweek game now because the league's probably going to put everything into having that game in a national TV slot. That's probably a Wednesday night hockey game on
Yeah.
TNT next year. Like, or at least it should be. If they want to do the smart thing, put that game on national TV and give it the audience that it probably deserves, because there's already heat to it. And it carried over the other direction too, because Jamie Drysdale gets to Philadelphia, plays in his first game, and you would think that he was some sort of hero to this franchise. I mean, he could be, obviously, with the rebuild
Yeah.
process, but he hasn't played a game yet. He hadn't played a minute yet. They introduced him in the starting lineup, and the place cheered for him as if he's been here for 10 years. So it's that part of the equation. Drysdale becomes like an instant hero just for being here, and
Yeah.
Gauthier is going to become a villain, and it's going to create a really interesting dynamic moving forward. So the whole situation kind of amounted to that, obviously, and there's a whole lot that got us here, but quite an interesting 24 48 hours between the trade itself at the game on Monday night and the game Wednesday night when Drysdale's in town and playing.
Mhm. And he came in, seemed so comfortable. And I know he has a friendship with Cam York, so that definitely made the transition a little bit easier for him. But everybody was so happy, so cheerful. And he came in and he was a force on the power play, which we have been struggling with this entire year. So it was, I think, kind of nice for everybody to see him come in and, have that pass to Morgan Frost and then even come in overtime and have all those shots on net.
Yeah, and he didn't. I don't want to categorize it like he didn't have a special game by any
Yeah.
stretch of the imagination,
Right.
but given the circumstances, he played very well. Like, you could just leave it at it was a good game for him, a really good debut. No, he played very well given the circumstances, not knowing much about the system, not knowing much about the Flyer style of play, considering he basically had one practice and one film session. That was about it. Like, there's a lot for him to learn about playing here that he's not going to be able to pick up in 48 hours or less, really, because that's really the time frame he had. There's a lot for him to pick up. And I think that maybe, the first game that a guy plays for a new team can sometimes be like this because they don't think. They don't have to think about anything. They're
Yeah.
literally told by the coaches, just go play. Just go
Mhm.
play to your strengths. Do whatever you see fit. We'll teach later. Just get your feet wet in a game. Just start there. And I think he did that, and I think it's interesting because he did get up ice a lot more. That was one thing that John Tortorella said he wanted to see more, was him get up ice. He did. And yet I think that Tortorella was right last night, that not enough. Like, there's more
Yeah.
room for him to get up ice and be effective offensively. Definitely in the 3-on-3 if they play more overtime games. And that's kind of like how I categorized it in the game recap.
Yeah.
He got that taste of what they've gone through for the last month and a half, probably, like all these games going beyond regulation, close, competitive games. He got thrown right into one that turned out to be exactly like that and didn't look out of place, looked like a fit for right now. So we see where it goes moving forward. A road trip is certainly a good thing for him. Now he gets even more team bonding time beyond the guys he already knows. I think beyond Cam York, he said he trains with Scott Lawton in the summers. So because they're from the same area. So that's a help to have somebody else like that there and everything like that. And guys are going to get to know him now, because obviously he's part of this for the rest of this season and beyond. So now they add, and that's the thing too, like it's interesting to watch them take this situation and add to their roster this year, because that was probably the farthest thing from my mind that they would do, is find a way to add anything to the roster this year. It just didn't seem possible. Like, it just didn't seem like the direction they wanted to go. But when you're pretty much forced into a situation where you trade your top forward prospect, then you're probably trying to get something back that maximizes the value. And if that happens to be a 21-year-old who's got 100 games of NHL experience already and is able to jump right into your lineup, then so be it. Go for it. And he's got a lot of potential. And if it works out completely, then both teams probably come away happy from this trade at the end of the day. But there's a lot of things to still be solved from both sides. Gauthier hasn't stepped on the ice yet professionally, and Drysdale's just getting started here. So we have to wait and see how it really pans out. But his first impression was good. I'll say that much. His first impression obviously was very good.
And during the game the other night, I think Sam Ersson, and aside from Jamie Drysdale being a standout, I think Sam Ersson had a standout game that night, especially his performance in overtime and the shootout.
Yeah, and well, considering the fact that in the first period he didn't make a save, that was that's always an interesting, like, that just never happens. That's a rarity. That's kind of a rarity of all rarities in an NHL game, that you only see two shots. They're both deflections, and I mean, like, the first one is a really good deflection. The second one's a bounce. I mean, that's as fluky as it gets, and of course teams will take that every day of the week, but it just was, neither was his fault, and he did his job from there, obviously, and goes right back to, he played in the shootout game that they had at home against Columbus at the start of the homestand, and took the loss in that one. That was the first time he'd lost a shootout all season, and he gets right back to, like, that form of where he's been this shootout specialist. Like, he's just so calm, and John Tortorella used the word unfazed, and I really like the choice of that word there, because that is really the way that he is. He is a very cool character, and kind of even shrugged off the part where it was 2 shots, 2 goals for Montreal in the first period. It's like, yeah, whatever, just go move forward with it. The team rallied back. That was great for them. And also, like, and they had played well enough to rally back anyway. I mean, like, you're sitting there watching that they're down 2-0, and they didn't deserve to be down 2-0. More so they deserve to be up 2-0 than anything. So again, it comes down to having having 2 goaltenders that can come in and play. And Ersson's been equally as good, if not slightly better than Carter Hart of late. And that's not to be a knock on Carter Hart. It's just how well Ersson's playing. And they've got something right now with those two. And that's one of the biggest reasons why this keeps going. We keep marking off all the dates: Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Now they're at the halfway point of the season. The end of the month is the All-Star break. How much further can they keep taking this and being in a playoff spot? And a big reason why they keep being there is because they've gotten goaltending, and other teams have not throughout the course of the season.
So they're coming off that loss Monday to Pittsburgh and the overtime shootout yesterday. What do you think this road trip is going to be looking like for them?
It should be interesting. And their first game coming in is one of these games that I find interesting because of information we know about the opposition. The Minnesota Wild are the team they face on Friday. And, from a goaltending standpoint, they're probably still going to see Marc-Andre Fleury, which is no slouch, but their top goaltender, Philip Gustafson's out with an injury, and their top forward, Kirill Kaprizov's out with an injury. You take pieces like that away, and it opens the door for an opportunity for you to maybe take advantage of getting 2 points and staying in this thing. That was why the game against Montreal was so important to end the homestand. They had a homestand to that point where they'd gotten, okay, you got 3 out of 6 points so far. These last 2 are pretty significant at that point. If getting 1 is okay, but really getting 2 and finishing that with 5 out of 8 balances this whole thing out. It balances out the previous 4-game road trip where they only got 3 out of 8. So they're, 8 points out of a possible 16 over their last 8 games. That's at least keeping pace. It's not allowing you to pull away in the standings, but you didn't fall out of the playoff picture like you could have, especially when they lost a bunch of games in a row. They won the first game of the road trip and then lost the following 3. That can influence things and could have changed that playoff picture dramatically. They get the win on Wednesday to kind of go into this road trip with some confidence. I kind of have the game that they're going to play the following night after playing Minnesota in Winnipeg kind of as a scheduled loss because back-to-backs are already tough enough as it is. That's a team that's been rolling. They're now they're now by points the top team in the NHL. That it's not going to favor the Flyers. If they were to find a way to pull off a win in that game and take care of business in Minnesota along with it, that would probably dramatically change the way we view this team and kind of where they're going as the month progresses, because that's just something that based on their play over the course of the last 3 weeks it doesn't look like a possibility. If they change that narrative, then we have a totally different conversation going into next week. And now the last game of that road trip, when they go to St. Louis, kind of takes on a totally different meaning now for things that are completely unrelated to the game because of all the things with Kevin Hayes that have been out there, and, right or wrong or correct or incorrect and whatever, whoever's saying what. Obviously it's all over the internet today that John Tortorella went off at the press conference last night and about that report. So, it's that there now there's a whole new dynamic to that part of the game, because like the timing of it couldn't be more ironic. This happens, they're going to go on the road. Oh, by the way, one of the stops on the road trip is St. Louis and Kevin Hayes. Okay, of course it is, because it just adds to it. It's going to be literally 1 week after the trade was made. It's going to be within the week of all of this going on in this kind of ongoing story. And it's a shame that it kind of comes to this, because it's a shame that people are talking about or sending messages like that and threats to Kevin Hayes. That should never happen at any point in any sport. And it has. Cutter Gauthier made comments finally after all this, had something similar to say about that in regards to how, like, things that he's getting. That's not right. Okay, the guy didn't want to play in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
That's his choice. Let's all move on. And if you want to, you want to give it to him when he comes to Philadelphia with another team next year because he didn't want to play for you, that's fine. That's part of competition. But you don't send death threats to athletes and threaten them, their families, anything like that or whatever. That's just crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. Simple as that. And so it's just but it's just interesting that the timing involves Hayes playing the Flyers for the first time too, really, because like that's the thing too. They're facing teams right now that they haven't seen yet this season. And a bunch of these are coming up at this kind of unique time in the schedule where you're at the halfway point. They're in the playoff picture. These games matter for that purpose. And now you're adding a layer to it with the trade and the connection that Hayes has with Gauthier and all that type of stuff like that. So, but the simple thing was, and I talked about this on the Sports Bash this week too, where it was like, the question that we came away from that trade asking is, why didn't Gauthier want to be a Flyer? And whether we ever find out the true reason or not is beside the point. We're asking it in the past tense. It's not like he voiced his displeasure with something within the organization, said I won't play for them, but no trade was made yet, and now it's public knowledge. And we're trying to gather in thoughts and whatever the reasoning may be, and there's no trade yet. He's still technically part of the Flyers organization, but will clearly not sign. And now, with that being public knowledge, you have to try to make the best of that situation with no leverage at all. They kept it under wraps until it was a thing of the past. He's gone now. So he's going to play for another organization. Let it be, and let's all move on and let the kid get on with his life and his development in Anaheim. Focus on Jamie Drysdale being a Flyer and being part of this team as they make a push now, because they're into the second half of the season. That's what this road trip represents, the second half of the season starting. So let's see where it all goes and try to move past a lot of the things that really at this point everything is out of their control anyway. So let's just move on from it and get back to the games in the second half of the season.
So we'll be keeping up with their road trip and with the newest Flyer, Jamie Drysdale, throughout the week. And we will be back next week to discuss it. And it will be posted on YouTube and 973ESPN.com.